knew we were having Wednesday Zoom, so that's good. I'm trying to, am I recording? Yeah, okay. Again, I will record calls for folks who are unable to attend, and remember that you get 2 sort of unexcused absences. You can miss 2 classes for various and sundry reasons that I don't need to know about. Beyond that, you need to be in communication with me about what's going on so that I can work with you. With regard to attendance, I've received a couple questions from people about the first class session that was held last week on Monday. Since that time, we've added about 10 or so folks to this group, and it is too difficult and cumbersome for me to weed out who was supposed to be here and who wasn't. And so we are starting recording attendance from today forward. So if you were here last week on Monday, it's a bonus for you. You got all the information in real time, right? And so starting today, I will request your names on the Zoom call. I will go back in and I will record your attendance according to who puts their name in the chat. We'll give people a few more minutes before we formally do that, just in case anyone is still coming onto the call. So not yet, but at some point. There was also a question about the asynchronous work. So I want to kind of walk through that for just a second, again, for the benefit maybe of those who didn't understand it or who were not here. The asynchronous work, well, and I have the syllabus pulled up, so I'm going to just share that for 1 sec too. So by this point, if you're seeing the syllabus, you should have read chapters 1 and 2. Nod your head if you got that. Yes. Okay, thank you. So chapters 1 and 2, and we will be discussing chapter 2 today. The assignments that go along with chapter 2 in terms of things that you should be doing this week in the asynchronous format are posted here to week 2. You've got love languages, reflection activity. I know a lot of you have already written that. I've gone in, I've read those. Because of the number of students in this class, I cannot respond to each of you individually. So the way that I normally do that, and this is the same for the Flipgrid video piece, I'm watching those.
How come everybody has the camera on? Okay, now there's all the people that don't have one.
I'm watching those as they come in, and I'm taking some notes. What I will do is at the end of the week, so the asynchronous work is due by Sunday at 11:59 p.m. of this week. If you don't get it done by then, no need to go back and try to do it, you know, any time after the fact. I will not be looking at it, and it will not count towards your attendance and participation if it's not done by Sunday before midnight. Everyone clear on that part? Okay. So it needs to be done by Sunday at midnight. After this weekend or some point during the weekend, I will sort of synthesize down everything that or the main points that I got from you all in those. And I will usually send out like an email to everyone that just kind of says, you know, here are the main things that your classmates were discussing in the asynchronous piece. So that's how that will be handled. And then your participation on those activities, I will go back in and log as your attendance and participation grade for the week. So you have to be in class in the synchronous format on Wednesdays, and you also have to complete those assignments to earn your full participation and attendance grades. I see a couple people have raised their hands with questions. You did have, yeah, so I think the questions are the same. Well, I see 2 questions in the chat, and then for folks who've raised your hand, you can jump in if this doesn't address your question. Do you have to do both the Flipgrid video and the submission? Yes. If there are multiple activities posted, the expectation is that you complete both of those by the end of this week. Are there other questions?
Yeah, I had a question. Is it going to be like that every week where like everything is due on Sunday, or the assignments can be due like the day of class?
No, so our week for the asynchronous piece will run Monday to Sunday. You will always have the entire week to get your work done.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on any of this stuff? I would also point out before we move into content for the day that your reflection 1, if you note on the syllabus, it says reflection 1 in progress as of Monday of this week. So my, word of advice to you is that sometime this week you take a look at that page, I believe it's 18, you read that, and then you start drafting some thoughts and ideas for reflection 1, because if you remember, those reflections are 1 through 5 are due around the midterm. Any other questions on anything related to course structure, organization type stuff? You see, where is the Flipgrid? Yes, so on the course page, you guys can see this. This is your asynchronous content for week 2, love languages reflection activity. It asks you to, you guys seeing this? Take the love languages quiz here, and then you will log in to this Flipgrid link and post your reflection on what your love language score was. Did that resonate with you? Were you surprised by anything? That sort of thing. Does that answer your question?
I think that what I know I'm confused about is just that on the assignment it says submit the Flipgrid, but then there's also the discussion topics. Do we have to do both of them, or is it just when it says the Flipgrid, just the Flipgrid? Okay, sorry. Yeah, no. So for this one, just the Flipgrid. I posted it as a forum. And wow, it looks like lots of you guys have done the written piece. So I apologize for that. I just posted it as a forum as a way to keep it organized. So no, you do not have to do both of those. But thank you for your time for those of you who did, and sorry for the confusion on that. If it's a Flipgrid post, I just want a video recorded response. And then you do need to go in and do the other written on the myths of romance. Michaela, if you'll stay on the call for just a few minutes after class, I'll go through this all with you individually, because I've already gone over it with the group. Okay. Any other questions before we move on?
Just to make sure I read everything correctly, we just had to turn in the Flipgrid and then the 6 myths of romance, I think that was just for the first week, right?
Yes. And it's not due until the end of this week. So if you haven't done that yet, so our week 2 is running from Monday 8/29 through Sunday of this week. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but whatever that date is. So all of our weeks will run that way, Monday to Sunday, for the asynchronous piece. So I don't necessarily expect you guys to hop on Monday and get stuff done before we meet on Wednesday. You have some more time. All right. So I would like to start today by kind of reflecting back on some of the ideas from chapter 1. Again, you should have read chapter 1. There was a lecture over the chapter 1 content posted to the As You Learn page. So hopefully you had a chance to review that. And what we're going to be talking through together is related to the table. It's table 1.2 on pages 13 and 14 in the textbook. I would say it might serve you in this conversation to have that available to you. So again, pages 13 and 14, table 1.2 in the textbook, and it's the theoretical frameworks that help us understand relationships, marriage and family. So I am going to give you guys a couple seconds to get that open. And also, if you'll take this opportunity to type your name in the chat for attendance on this call. And I have opened a document that gives you at the top these different theoretical frameworks for understanding marriage and family relationships. Those are family life course development, human ecology, social exchange theory, feminist theory, conflict theory, symbolic interaction theory, family systems, couple and family technology framework, and structure and function framework. Based on your reading, you should have a general understanding of sort of what these theories entail and how they help us understand marriage and family relationships. What I want to do right now is kind of we're going to take real life scenarios and try to apply these theories for understanding relationships to those real life scenarios. There will be a piece just like this on your midterm, or I'm sorry, on your exam 1. So I want you to be able not just to tell me based on this table, family life course development theory says that families pass through stages, but I want you to be able to read through real life family scenarios and tell me which one of those speaks to this idea of family life course development. So take just a minute and look through the list down at the bottom of these scenarios and let me know, either using the chat or if someone wants to unmute and share, which scenario do you think best fits for family life course development? And again, we're thinking about the idea here that families move through stages, essentially stages of development. Anyone got an idea? Okay, so I'm going to ask the question again, where I'm asking you to tell me which scenario fits best with this first theory of family life course development.
Is it the child raised in a loving home with committed parents that tend to have better social and academic outcomes?
Tell me why you thought that.
Well, it was between that one and then talking about like the husband and wife decide to buy a new home, but the second one, the first one I read talked more about like the family life and how it developed them into having better social and academic outcomes. So it was more like their family life because it mentioned the loving home with connected parents, and then also how it developed them.
Okay, so family life course development theory is really trying to help us understand how families move through a progression over time through different stages of development, right? So essentially it's an individual, a man or, you know, a partner comes together with another partner, and then they become a couple, right? And then eventually down the road, most couples become parents, and then they become retired parents, and then they become grandparents. So there are these different sort of points in time in the development of a family. So based on that, the scenario that fits best with family life course development is that the husband and wife decide to buy a new home with more space before their first baby arrives. Okay. Does everyone see how we got there? Okay. I think I can cut and paste that so you can see it in real time. Let's do one more. And I saw a question come through the chat. I had this. Okay. The textbook has, I'm addressing your question, Chelsea, that the textbook has a table in it that gives us these theoretical frameworks. You should have already read chapter 1, in which it explains all these theoretical frameworks. So if you haven't done that, go back and read them. Hopefully they make more sense to you if you've read the text. Then you have this table to refer to. But what I'm asking folks to do right now is sort of think about what these theories mean and how to apply them to real life family situations. And someone asked a question about seeing this document. I have made it visible on As You Learn now. I will also make visible an answers key that tells you where each scenario fits once we're done with this. I just didn't want folks to like look at that before class and be like, what are we supposed to do with this? But you will have access to this document with answers so that you can study it for your test 1. Okay. All right. So let's do one more. Let's talk about symbolic interaction. Okay, so symbolic interaction theory tells us that people communicate through symbols and give meaning to the behavior of others. There are other kind of ways to understand this. They talk about the looking glass self in the textbook. So that the way that we perceive ourselves is based on our interactions with others, especially based on our interactions with our partners in relationships. Okay. Looking glass self, how I understand myself is largely dependent on how my partner interacts with me. So which scenario at the bottom fits best with symbolic interaction?
Would it be the my partner always laughs at my jokes one?
Yes. So my partner always laughs at my jokes, which in turn helps me develop this sense that I am funny. I have a good sense of humor. And that's referring back to that idea of the looking glass self. Okay. So I would recommend you taking some time to practice with this. And kind of think through how do these make sense. Let's talk about this one real quick. I'm going to reverse it and let's do a scenario. A couple decides they will both give up social media for a month in an attempt to reconnect and spend more time together. Where do you think that fits? A couple sets parameters around their social media use to enhance their relationship. Couple and family technology framework. Yes, because that theory or that framework suggests to us that couples in relationships often have to set rules, boundaries, define roles around use of technology and how that's going to impact and influence their relationship with one another. That is a theme that will come up over and over and over again in this class, is how impactful technology and media, particularly social media, can be on relationships and interactions. Now, you know, there's a ton of emerging research that suggests, of course, there are benefits, but there are a lot of drawbacks. And so we're going to unpack a lot of those as we go through this class. Okay, so you should now have a decent sense of what I'm asking you to do here. I am making the answer sheet visible to you now, so you have that available for you moving forward. And now we're going to kind of move ahead to chapter 2 content. So we're going to be talking specifically about love. Objectives for the class today are to discuss the meaning of love. We're going to talk about different theories that help us understand love. We will look at social control of love. What are the contexts in which that happens? Different conditions for love. So what type of social, psychological experiences do we have to feel love? We will talk about love as a context for issues like jealousy, mistrust, those types of issues that come up in love relationships. And then we'll end with a quick bit about polyamory, which is a specific type of love relationships that some people engage in. So when we think about meanings of love, and I think you guys are just hearing me talk, I'll reiterate now that this, the PowerPoint is available to you on the course page, with the expectation that you will go in, download, and or take some notes, because it's a very bare bones PowerPoint. All right. Meanings of love. We have romantic love, which is this idea that, you know, love creates this intense desire and longing for another individual. Conjugal or realistic love is a love that is more about companionship. It's about the security of having another sort of fixture in your life in terms of your partner. It's characterized by calmness, right? And then lust or infatuation, that's more of the passionate love. Could be attraction not based on, you know, sound reason. It's more of a fast and furious type of love. I will take an opportunity to say that these are not mutually exclusive of one another. You can experience these types of love, you know, you can experience all of these types of love within the same relationship. You know, you can have companionate love with someone that you also feel lust and infatuation for at times, and then that romantic piece, longing for that person, etc. Different love styles. These are coming from a theorist named John Lee. He did this work in the 70s and 80s. And again, these different love styles are not mutually exclusive of one another, but they are kind of a lens that offer us a way to look at and understand, you know, what is the meaning of love in different contexts, and kind of how do we engage in love in different love styles. So ludic love is the term that he uses to describe love as a game in which there is no intent to become seriously involved. Okay, this could look like multiple partners, lack of commitment. It's really just, you know, having fun. There's a love that he calls pragma, coming from the root pragmatic. This is logical and rational love. Okay, it looks at what are the benefits and the consequences of engaging with this romantic partner. And if you think back to chapter 1, that is largely related to the social exchange theory, in which we see that same idea that people make choices about romantic partners and romantic relationships based on what's it going to cost me and what are the benefits that I'm going to incur. Eros love. This looks a little bit like the passionate, lustful type of love. It is based on sexual desire and a real sort of drive to be with another person. Eros. Mania Mania is a style of love that can get a little bit tricky. It's, related to that root of manic. And it is a sort of a must-have love. It's characterized by jealousy, a partner who's very possessive, and perhaps dependent on another person. There are two more love styles. Storge is also called companionate love. So storge or companionate love often lacks that intense passion that we saw in the Eros type of love, that romantic desire. But it is characterized by respect, friendship, commitment. Those really sort of stable type of concepts relate to storge love. And then agape, also called compassionate love. This is really when you love someone with a focus on the other person's well-being. Agape love is often associated with parenting relationships, sometimes associated with romantic relationships where things shift later in life and one partner becomes perhaps a caretaker of the other partner. It's not so much about companionship as it is about compassion for the other person. Does anyone have questions about the different love styles that we've just gone through? No, Monica, there is not a way to access the notes. The notes are for you to be taking now. Okay. If there are no other questions on love styles, we're gonna talk now, and you do need to know the different love styles. You need to know what they are and how they are characterized. Moving on then to talk about Sternberg's theory. He developed what he called the triangular view of love. And I'm trying to find this in the textbook so I can point you to.
Sorry, I just have a quick question.
Okay.
Do we have to know who developed these theories? Like, is that something that we're going to be tested on?
No, I just want you to understand the theories.
Okay.
Yep. And what they mean. Okay, so the triangular view of love is on page 35 of the textbook. And so Sternberg developed this theory. Basically, he wanted to kind of look at three ideas that characterize love in his view. These three basic elements are intimacy, passion, and commitment. And you can see by the visual here that he relates those to mind, body, and spirit. So the mind is related to the intimacy piece. The body is related to passion, and then spirit and commitment. This Venn diagram shows how he represented these different things overlapping. So let's take non-love. Non-love is the absence of intimacy, passion, and commitment, right? It doesn't show up in this grid. Liking is characterized by intimacy with no passion or commitment. So you can see liking is its own thing over here. Romantic love is characterized by intimacy and passion, but has a lack of commitment. Okay, so these different views of love are outlined on page 35, and it goes on to page 36. And sometimes this type of visual representation doesn't serve. So I have something that works a little bit better for me personally is over here. Let me see. This is linked to the course page, but it's more of like a graphic instead of the Venn diagram. And so liking, again, characterized by intimacy, lack of passion and commitment. You see that? Infatuation, characterized by passion and commitment, but has a lack of intimacy. I'm sorry, infatuation is characterized by passion, has a lack of intimacy and commitment. Does this make sense? Yes. So you're looking at how it's the interplay of these three basic elements. Liking, intimacy, passion, and commitment. I think I'm going to just kind of leave this with you all so that, I'm not running through and reading what's on the text on page 35 and 36. That's where I'm going to refer you to. Read through those, how they describe infatuation, romantic, conjugal, etc. And then if you have further questions about that, we can revisit this when we come back together next time. But be familiar with these different views of love. So another piece that's outlined in chapter 2 is about the 5 love languages. You had opportunity or will have opportunity to work through the love languages quiz, which helps you determine out of these 5 what your top love languages, and it's based on a percentage. It's kind of, how you best receive love. The 5 love languages, and this is coming from Gary Chapman's work. The love languages are gifts, quality time, words of affirmation, acts of service, and physical touch. And what's kind of important to know about these love languages is, and one thing that I've heard already kind of coming out of your discussions around these is that they're somewhat rooted in our experiences with our family of origin, right? So the way that we received love as a child, or the way that we saw our parents relating to one another, giving and receiving love, often informs our own love language. So some people, really want words of affirmation above and beyond, physical, tangible gifts. They need that type of communication from their partner. Other people, words of affirmation just sort of fall on deaf ears, and they really crave physical touch or acts of service. So, you can imagine that in a relationship with another human, it's very important to know what you need in terms of how you receive love. It's also important to know what they need so that you can, be of service to them in giving them love in their own language. So that's part of why I have you do this quiz. Some people mentioned that they hadn't really had exposure to these ideas before, but it is a tool that you can kind of use to, reflect on your experiences with love relationships thus far, and maybe inform things moving forward. But do understand kind of what is meant by this language of love piece, and what the love languages are. Any questions or ideas on anything so far?
I know we had like an assignment that was surrounded by the quiz that we take from the love languages. When is that due?
It's due by Sunday at midnight.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other thoughts on love languages, views of love, styles of love? Love, love, love. Nope. Okay. So this piece about social control of love, one way that we see that, and this doesn't happen so much in the United States, it happens a lot more in other cultures. Although if anyone has watched a show like Married at First Sight, it's one of my guilty pleasures. That is the same type of idea here, right? It's an arranged marriage where experts, quote unquote experts, take, your information, your personal preferences, those sorts of things, and they match you with a partner in an arranged marriage type of situation. In other cultures, it's done based on other things, but that is an example of social control of love, where other parties, are playing matchmaker or involved in the pairing of romantic partners. Another way that we see social control of love present itself is when a parent might disapprove of a child's choice in partner. So sometimes this might look like same-sex partner relationships, interracial or intercultural partners might be difficult for families of origin to accept. And we see parents try to exert social control of, the love relationship that their child engages in. There is also sometimes this element of social control in the workplace. Oftentimes, office relationships are disapproved of. They might even be, it might be written into the policies and procedures of a place of employment that those are not to happen. There's a excerpt in chapter 2 on page 37 and 38 that digs into that idea of preventing love in the workplace and or supporting love in the workplace, and kind of articulates advantages and disadvantages and various policies that companies might employ around this idea. But again, that's another way we could see social control of love show up. All right. Moving now to talk about theories of love. So in the same way that we have those frameworks that help us understand marriage and family relationships, these are some specific theories geared towards helping us understand love relationships. Okay. So it's not so much about, the family context. This is about two people coming together in a romantic, intimate, companionate, passionate, however you want to look at it, love relationship. All right. The first theory that I want you to be aware of is evolutionary theory. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's based on an evolutionary mechanism that suggests the bond between two adults who parent a child supports that offspring in, growing and developing. Okay, so it's very much rooted in evolutionary theory that there is an evolutionary benefit to the love relationship between two partners for those partners' offspring. Learning theory. Learning theory is an idea based on kind of social exchange of behaviors. This theory purports that love develops as individuals respond to the behavior of their partner. So smiles, physical touch, acts of service, all of those love languages, actually, gifts, words of affirmation. When we receive those things from another individual, this theory suggests that we develop love feelings as a response to those behaviors. It is something that is learned over time. Sociological theories. These are really looking at love as a way to connect with others in a sensual way in a world that this theory says is based on informal social relationships. So sociological theory says, we have all of these impersonal relationships in our lives. And in order to establish a deeper level of sensual connection, the text calls it sensual salvation even, we engage in love relationships. A piece of sociological theory is looking at this wheel model, which basically says love feelings develop in 4 stages. First, we develop a rapport with another person. From that rapport, we discover things about ourselves in this experience of self-revelation. We then develop what they call a mutual dependency. So, we have established a relationship. We are learning things about ourselves in the relationship. That creates a need to remain in the relationship as it supports our own personal development and ultimately fulfills our personal needs. Okay, that's the wheel model related to sociological theory. And again, this is an attempt to explain love relationships as a way to sort of overcome the impersonal nature of the social relationships that we have otherwise in our social experiences. I'm going to pause for questions or comments on any of these 3: evolutionary, learning, sociological theories. Nobody? Okay. Psychosexual theory. This is getting back to Freud's theory. Freud's theory was based a lot on sexual repression, and the early 1900s, society back then was kind of characterized by sexual repression, especially if you compare then to now, right? And so the psychosexual theory stated that love is actually a feeling that we develop as a result of blocked biological sexual desires. People were not, it was not socially normed to engage in sexual behaviors. And so, as a way to be able to engage in sex acts in a socially appropriate way, people develop these love feelings. That's essentially what this theory is saying. Sexual repression created love feelings because partners wanted to engage in sex acts. The biochemical theory. Biochemical theory suggests that love is a result of chemical hormonal cocktails that are released in our systems when we engage in acts of physical touch and sexual acts. So, when you are engaging in those behaviors, your brain is flooded with doses of oxytocin and this other hormone chemical, phenylethylamine. It's abbreviated PEA. But those hormonal releases in this biochemical theory are thought to cause feelings of, enamorment and love towards another person. These same hormones are also released in mothers when a mother is nursing an infant, when mothers and children engage in physical contact, you get that same dose of oxytocin that you get from a romantic partner. And so this biochemical theory really sort of reinforces the first theory that we talked about, which is the evolutionary theory, in showing us that there is sort of this underlying evolutionary mechanism that bonds mothers to their offspring in the same way that these hormones can bond one partner to another. And then attachment theory. Attachment theory is this idea that our primary motivation in this life is to connect with other people. So we initially, when we come into the world, we are seeking attachment with our parents, with our family of origin. And from there, we learn different attachment styles. And there's actually kind of an expansion on that, on As You Learn. Attachment styles. It is a video, I believe. Yes. I'm gonna save that and we'll see where we are on time. But if we don't get to that, I would encourage you to go back and look at the different attachment styles. We may actually, I think I'm just gonna, it's like 3 minutes, so I may share that now. But pretty much, before we do that, what you need to understand about the theory is that attachment theory is basically saying that, in this life, what we are seeking is connection with others. And that is why we engage in love relationships, is to fulfill that need for attachment and connection. I do think it's valuable. It'll give me a moment to take a pause. And I think it's important to understand the different attachment styles because, again, this is something that can inform your understanding of your previous relationships and kind of, how you got to where you are. But I'm going to take a minute to share this with you now. And you should be able to see that. Okay, thank you.
The attachment theory argues that a strong emotional and physical bond to one primary caregiver in our first years of life is critical to our development. If our bonding is strong and we are securely attached, then we feel safe to explore the world. We know that there is always that safe base, which we can return to anytime. If our bond is weak, we feel insecurely attached. We are afraid to leave or explore a rather scary-looking world because we are not sure if we can return. People who are securely attached are said to have greater trust, can connect to others, and as a result, are more successful in life. Insecurely attached people tend to mistrust others, lack social skills, and have problems forming relationships. There is one type of secure attachment, and there are 3 types of insecure attachments: anxious ambivalent, anxious avoidant, and anxious disorganized. In responses to distress, the first 3 react organized, while the last acts disorganized. To understand the theory better, let's look at Mr. and Mrs. Smith, who have 4 children: Luca, Anne, Joe, and Amy. The Smiths are lovely parents who cuddle, make frequent eye contact, speak warmly, and are always there for their kids. But one day, Mr. Smith falls very sick and dies. For Mrs. Smith, life now becomes very difficult. She spends all day working, while at the same time trying to care for her children. An impossible task. At 6 years of age, Luca's brain is for the most part developed, his character strong and his worldview shaped. The new situation does not affect him much. He knows there is still always Mum, his safe haven. He feels securely attached. Later, he turns into a trusting and optimistic young man. His self-image is positive. Anne, who is 3, has problems coping with the new lack of attention. To Anne, her mother now acts unpredictably. She is anxious about their relationship and as a result becomes clingy. To get her mum's attention, she has to raise her emotional state and scream. When her mum finally reacts with a predictable response, she herself acts ambivalent and doesn't show her true feelings. Later in life, others think Anne is unpredictable or moody. Her self-image is less positive. Her attachment style is anxious ambivalent. 2-year-old Joe spends his days with his uncle, who loves him, but thinks that a good education means being strict. If little Joe shows too much emotion or is too loud, his uncle gets angry and sometimes punitive. This scares Joe. He learns that to avoid fear, he has to avoid showing his feelings, also in other situations. As an adult, he continues this strategy and has problems entering relationships. His image of himself is rather negative. His attachment is anxious avoidant. Amy, who is just 1 year old, gets sent to a nursery. The staff there is poorly trained, overworked, and often very stressed. Some are outright abusive. Amy therefore becomes anxious of the very people she seeks security from, a conflict which totally disorganizes her ideas about love and safety. As she is experiencing fear without resolution, she tries to avoid all social situations. As an adult, she thinks of herself as unworthy of love. Her self-image is very negative. Her attachment is anxious, disorganized. Our attachment is formed in the very first years of our lives, a time when we are too young to communicate our anxiety, and as a result, can experience high levels of stress. Then our adrenal gland, an organ sitting on top of our kidneys, produces the stress hormones adrenaline and cortisol. The heart rate increases, the blood pressure goes up, and we become alert.
All right, I'm going to stop it there because he's going to continue talking about kind of the biological mechanisms by which this happens. So that information is there for you if you want to learn more. But what I want to hear from you, if someone would be willing to either unmute or use the chat feature to share kind of key takeaways. So what did you hear in that that stands out to you about attachment, how it is formed? Anything?
What stood out to me was just when they were talking about how most of these things develop at such an early age where we honestly have no control over it, which I think is really crazy that your whole perception of love can be completely like diminished when you're just 1 year old. But yeah.
Yep. And someone in the chat just sort of reiterated that your worldview can be completely formed by the age of 6, right? How you understand relationships happens before you even know it's happening. And for a lot of parents, you know, if you're not educated around these issues, the way that you are interacting with your child is shaping those beliefs and behaviors that they are going to engage in as adults. And that may be happening kind of unbeknownst to everyone. And someone in the chat just said, attachment is formed by how parents tend to treat their children. So yes, that's the cornerstone of it all, right? Is that those parent-child interactions or the caregiver, you know, it doesn't have to be the biological parent, but the primary caregivers. Because as you saw in the video, the one child who was sent to the nursery and was being taken care of by, you know, professionals who were ill-trained, they developed an attachment style related to their experience with those caregivers that they had during the day. Someone noted that you can have a different attachment style than your siblings, which is a very good thing to observe, right? That because everyone in the family is an individual, yes. And so as a mother of 2 children, the way that I interact with my oldest child is not the same necessarily as the way that I interact with my youngest child, because they bring their own personalities and their own experiences into the dynamic and we do this dance, right? Where I know what might work for my oldest child doesn't work at all for my youngest, and vice versa. And so, yes, that can create, there's also things that happen, like in the video, we saw that the oldest child in this hypothetical scenario, he lost his father when he was 6 years old. So his attachment style had already been formed. And then there was a crisis, a life circumstance, right, that shifted the dynamic of the family. And that's real life circumstances that happens to us. So the younger children in that family are going to get a different experience with the mother than what the oldest child got. It is possible. I don't know, to answer your question, Braden, about is it possible for it to change? I don't know, like, the scientific answer to that. I do know that awareness, therapies, those types of things that can support you if, say, you recognize that you have an ancient avoidant attachment style, and that you tend to shut down your feelings, to withdraw and close other people off. If you recognize that about yourself, then am I frozen? Can't tell. Everyone else is frozen. Can y'all still hear me? Okay. Okay. I think if you recognize that that you have an attachment style that's characterized by negative patterns, you can do work to sort of circumvent that, right? I don't know that you can necessarily change it over time, because again, these are things that are so foundational and happen to us so early in life. But I think you can do work to make some shifts. So, and that's really, again, why I wanted to share that with you, is so that you can take a look at, so the 4 different types that we heard are secure. That's the one with the most positive outcomes, right? Securely attached individuals. And securely attached individuals have benefited from parenting relationships or caregiver relationships that are nurturing, responsive, etc. There are 3 different types of insecure attachments. Insecure attachments are anxious and ambivalent, anxious avoidant, and anxious disorganized. And so, those 3 have different sort of nuances to them, but those are, often characterized by emotional instability and challenges in relating to other people. All right.
What were it was anxious, ambivalent, anxious, disorganized, and anxious, what was the last one? Avoidant?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So ancient, ambivalent, they tend to not show their true feelings. Anxious, avoidant tend to stamp out their feelings and not show any, or avoid interpersonal interactions altogether. And then anxious, disorganized, it's a very confused response. And sometimes, this can come from parenting styles that are very nurturing and caring in one circumstance, and then, aggressive and assertive, or aggressive and, kind of hostile in another circumstance. So the child never knows what to expect. And then that's how they end up relating to other people, is in this very confused, disorganized way. I think you can have kind of it's sort of like the love languages, right? Like you might have 45% and 45% going into different categories where you receive love in 2 kind of major ways. I think you can have tendencies towards more than one of these attachment styles. But generally speaking, everyone is characterized by kind of one attachment style. And it, I'm sure there are ways to take a personal inventory and kind of figure that out for yourself. All right, so quickly, I'm going to talk about the idea of falling in love, what we need in terms of social and physical conditions in order for us to kind of, experience love, right? A lot of this, and the text outlines more than what I'm going to talk about here, but a lot of this is based on social norms around love, okay? Cultural expectations that define how we experience love. The media influence, you should have or are reading about those 6 myths related to romance. So those are kind of culturally prevalent ideas that really, if you grew up like I did, watching, Disney movies where there was always a damsel in distress and then a knight in shining armor, that type of thing, it is culturally embedded, that we kind of grow up believing these ideas about love. A lot of that comes from, social media and all types of media cultural influences. But we look for those things then when we are looking for love relationships, right? We have these ideas really in like a subconscious level. There are also physical conditions of love. Again, some of these are informed by socio-cultural conditions, such as our cultural ideas about appearance. What do we think constitutes attraction in another person? There's some research in the text that talks about how BMI, which is your body mass index, how that is related to probability of love relationships. Okay, and it looks like this: as a person's BMI increases, we see the probability of their love relationships decreasing. That's called a negative relationship. So there's a negative relationship between body mass index and love relationships. We also see that increased BMI relates to low relationship quality. All right, so those are some things related to physical conditions for love that, are just important to kind of understand, because again, it's this sort of behind the scenes stuff that impacts our relationships. And then psychological conditions for love. Psychological conditions include your perception of how much your partner cares for you or likes you, different personality qualities, I'm just trying to give you a specific example. Intelligence, your sense of humor, those type of things. Those impact relationship conditions. Self-esteem, that's your personal self-concept, how much self-worth, how much value you perceive yourself having. That's going to impact in a large way how you show up in a love relationship with another person. And then self-disclosure. Self-disclosure is really related to your degree of openness with another individual, right? So how much are you willing to share with them, trust them? And the text outlines these 8 specifics on page 42. It's, how open are you willing to be about your background, your history coming into the relationship, about your finances, about your feelings towards yourself, about your feelings towards your body, your thoughts and ideas on social issues, your interests, hobbies, etc., your work life, and then your feelings about others. So those are the 8 dimensions that, if you are reserved or closed off in those areas, it tends to have a negative impact on how you experience love with another person. Ideas, questions, anybody need to chime in? All right. I said we would talk about love as a context for problems. I want you to know that there are 7 sort of critical issues related to love. These are kind of the flip side, the negatives, right? Love. So if anyone else has a question about the reflections, you can just stay on the call for a few minutes after we're done, and I will talk through that with you guys individually. 7 issues related to love. The first one is unrequited love, right? So it's, I love this person and they do not reciprocate. Love can make you engage in dangerous, risky choices. Sometimes because of maybe what I mentioned at the beginning of class with families of origin, trying to enforce social control over love. Engaging in a love relationship with a certain partner might mean that you are giving up relationship with some of your family of origin. There is the issue of simultaneous loves that are not consensual between partners, right? So you might be feeling these feelings for more than one partner, and you have to navigate that. Love relationships also open up the potential for abuse in relationships. Again, we're going to spend a good amount of time talking about abuse and the cycle and what it feels like and looks like, but just to be aware that that's an issue related to love. Gaslighting. Can anyone give me an example of what it means to be gaslighted by another person? It's a form of emotional manipulation.
Gaslighting is when, say you have someone told you something was happening, so you get all ready for it, and they were like, oh, that was never happening. Like, it's slowly lying to you about little things over points in time so that you no longer have control over your own like mind and thoughts unless they tell you to do something.
Yes, and it can happen in an emotional way where, you know, they are hostile, abusive, neglectful, you respond or react to that. And then they're like, you're crazy, that didn't happen, I never said that. It's this minimizing of your experience and your reality in whatever way that happens. But it's a form of emotional manipulation. It could be playing the victim and making everything seem like it is your fault. Someone, you know, again, minimizing your experience. And then knowing that love can open us up to profound sadness and depression, particularly when we lose that love, in whatever way that may happen, you know, death, the end of a relationship, whatever. But that sadness and depression is one of the issues that can occur as a result of love. Okay. Love can also create jealousy. The text outlines 3 different types of jealousy. There's reactive jealousy, where I see something that my partner is doing and I react to it, right? I think he's texting an ex and, you know, I flip out. That's reactive jealousy. Anxious jealousy is sort of worrying about things that maybe haven't even happened yet, right? So my partner goes out, doesn't call me for several hours, and I'm creating all of this anxiety in my mind that he's out with someone else and, you know, engaging in behaviors that probably aren't necessarily happening. It's a result of my own anxiety. And then possessive jealousy. This is really where those other 2 things kind of take action, right? And possessive jealousy involves an attack on a partner or an attack on the person whom is allegedly with a partner, often characterized by crimes of passion. You know, going to a party, seeing a person's vehicle there, you key the car because you're, you know, completely beside yourself that they're there with your ex or whatever the case may be. That's possessive jealousy. It's an act towards another person as a result of these jealous feelings. Jealousy can come from external causes, like I just said, you see that at a party and you can't handle it, or it can come from these internal causes of mistrust, lack of self-esteem, your own personal insecurities, and lack of perceived alternatives. If I think this is the only relationship that I'm going to have, you know, then I tend to be more possessive of that relationship. And finally, a quick note on polyamory, which is a lifestyle that embraces multiple lovers. Okay, I just want to mention that polyamory is characterized by this idea of compersion. That is my approval and actually embracing my partner's emotional, that's important, emotional and sexual involvement with another person. So this is not swinging or casual sex where I'm in a monogamous emotional relationship, but we are open to other sexual partners. That is not this. Polyamory is an emotional and physical relationship with multiple partners. And it is consensual because it involves that compersion among partners. Okay. I think you can probably process on your own time some clear disadvantages to that. And there are also some advantages. They're outlined in the book. I would take a look at those. And, you know, just a note that this is sometimes a lifestyle chosen by those with sexual minority identities. Any questions on anything that we talked about today? Okay, so you know where you're at, you know what to do moving forward. Make sure you have asynchronous stuff done by Sunday night. Read for next week, chapter 3. I should see your name in the chat if you were here today. And then I am going to stay on the call and talk about reflections for anyone who wants that information. If you do not need that information, again, happy Wednesday evening, and I will see you next week on Wednesday. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.